Picture this. Imagine one day waking up from a coma only to see the world filled with disgusting, pulsating, putrid flesh, where everyone who used to be human now look like monster. Beauty become grotesque. That's the twisted world of Saya no Uta, a visual novel that delves into the darkest corner of human psychology and love. Developed by Nitroplus and directed by Gen Urobuchi, Saya no Uta tells a story of madness, isolation, and the extremes of affection experienced by Sakisaka Fuminori. After surviving an accident that was supposed to leave him with permanent disability, he woke up to find the world around him filled with disgusting, pulsating flesh, and everyone he saw had a monstrous appearance. But in that nightmarish hell, he met Saya, a normal-looking girl who offered him salvation and love. However, behind those smile and affection, Saya harbored a dark secret. The game was quite controversial upon its release due to its graphic depiction, including gore, sexuality, and psychological horror. However, its unique storyline, which delved deeply into the psychological horror and Lovecraftian theme, was a combination that was really uncommon back then for a visual novel, allowing it to garner a dedicated fanbase who were looking for something beyond the mainstream at that time. Over the years, Saya no Uta has been considered a cult classic as it pushed the boundaries and leaves a lasting impression on those who have experienced it. The game opens with Fuminori sitting around three wriggling masses of flesh bubbles, engaging in an unintelligible conversation. They're seen slurping sludges from their cups as they talk about things that he couldn't understand, but by listening carefully, Fuminori was able to get the gist of what they're saying. This is important to avoid arousing their suspicion. But why would he need to do this when the creatures surrounding him are none other than his friends? Yes, the creatures in front of him are definitely his friends. At least, that's how normal people sees them. But in Fuminori's eyes, they're nothing but grotesque creature. Fuminori tried to keep quiet throughout the entire conversation, but then one of the monsters named Koji asked if Fuminori was going to the ski trip that they had planned. Fuminori tries to suppress his loathing towards the creature and act normally, but he was unable to do so and averted his eyes. He answered Koji by saying that he didn't know if he would go. Koji then asked if he had other plan, but Fuminori just coldly answers him. Koji tried talking him into agreeing with the plan, but Fuminori had enough. He answered Koji by telling him that he'd asked his doctor if he was allowed to go and left the place in a hurry. After Fuminori left, the game then goes back to the starting point, but this time we as the player gets to see what these three monsters look like. Contrary to what Fuminori believed, Koji and the others are normal looking human. The conversation here is the same as the one we heard in Fuminori's POV, but is much more clearer and continues after he left. Here we learn from Koji that Fuminori was involved in an accident that took the lives of his parents. A tractor-trailer flipped over at the highway, crushing the Sakisaka family into a twisted scrap. The accident was so bad that they couldn't tell which body belongs to whom. Luckily, Fuminori survived the incident, but ever since then, he's not the same person. When they went to visit him the first time, Koji describes how Fuminori was so terrified of them that he had to be tied to the bed. He describes how he looked at them as if they weren't even human. We then learn that Yo, one of their friends, was supposed to be dating Fuminori, but because of the accident, she never got an answer. The game then shifts to Fuminori meeting up with his doctor for the weekly checkup. Her name is Tanbo Ryoko. Ryoko describes how she didn't like dealing with Fuminori because not only was he really annoying to deal with, but he also gave her the look as if she was the most disgusting thing that had ever existed. She then proceeded with her checkup on Fuminori, asking if he had experienced any side effect after the surgery, but Fuminori just gave her the basic answer. You can see why she's frustrated with him. We also learn about Fuminori's surgery here. According to Ryoko, they had to perform neurosurgery on him, and since they didn't have any other way to save him, they had to use an experimental procedure. Already we can see that the doctor might have fucked up here. Ryoko then goes on to tell him that there have been reports of serious neurological disorder post-surgery, which is why they must continue this weekly checkup. Fuminori, probably annoyed by this, asked Ryoko if she had already checked the MRI. Ryoko said that she had and found nothing wrong with him. Fuminori, satisfied by this, told her that he'd be fine even without the checkup since the MRI shows nothing wrong with him. But Ryoko, sensing that Fuminori might have lied to her, told him that they should still continue their checkup and urged him to trust her. Fuminori, realizing there's no way to escape this, changed his approach. He asked Ryoko if she could tell him anything about Dr. Ogai. Remember this name because it'll be important later on. For now, Fuminori pressed on with his question and learned that Dr. Ogai left the hospital some time ago for personal reasons. Ryoko then asked Fuminori why he kept asking about Dr. Ogai. Fuminori then revealed that he had recently become close with a relative of Dr. Ogai who asked him to find the doctor. Ryoko immediately answered that Dr. Ogai doesn't have a relative, which made Fuminori suspect that she knows more than she let on. He pressed on until Ryoko has no more excuse and fell silent. Fuminori, thinking that he would finally get the answer from her, loosened up and told her that he must find Dr. Ogai as there is a girl who needs him the most. But instead of getting the right answer, Ryoko denied him by telling Fuminori to ask the police instead. Here we can see the text revealing her true intention. Despite asking him to go to the police for help, she actually doesn't want him to do that because there's an incident involving Dr. Ogai which Ryoko was also a part of. So she fears that his disappearance would lead the police to investigate the university, which in turn would expose her as well. So she took a gamble on Fuminori, knowing that he wouldn't go to the police since he knew that everything he said was a lie. Dr. Ogai doesn't have a relative. After telling him that she would help him find Dr. Ogai, Ryoko then changed the subject by discussing Fuminori's next week's schedule, but by then he was already gone. By now you're probably wondering what's going on with Fuminori. Why does he see this hellish landscape when everyone else sees normal stuff? This brings back to his conversation with Ryoko about Dr. Ogai. You see, Fuminori was involved in an accident that left him with no choice but to undergo experiment neurosurgery. The one who performed the surgery was Dr. Ogai himself. This saves his life but also gave him an extreme case of agnosia. Agnosia, for those unaware, is a rare disorder where patient cannot recognize and identify objects, persons, or sounds using one or more of their senses despite having normally functioning senses. In Fuminori's case, his agnosia was very severe, making the world around him appear decayed and disgusting. This has been going on for 3 months now, driving him mad and to the brink of despair. But thankfully, he found hope in the form of a girl who appeared normal in his eyes. After meeting the doctor, we are then introduced to Saya, the only girl who appeared human to Fuminori. As soon as he heard Saya's greeting, Fuminori was filled with joy and returned to his normal, happy self. He greeted her back and Saya talked about what she did that day. Here we get to see the extent of what Fuminori was willing to do to cope with his agnosia. In his living room, we can see a half-painted room. He stated that by painting the room in a color that is pleasant to him, he'll be able to forget all of this. And true to that, after painting the place, he finally was able to get a good night's sleep since the accident. Saya returns with the food she cooked for him, but since he had agnosia, the food tastes horrible. Fuminori asked Saya to join him for dinner, but Saya declined, saying that she had already eaten. We learned that Saya was the girl that Fuminori said had a connection with Dr. Ogai. Apparently, she is the daughter of that doctor. Now here's the part where if we have the director's cut edition, which is $2 by the way, the scene after this would go straight into an explicit 18+ scene where both Saya and Fuminori did the deed in glorious HD, fully uncensored. And to be honest, I 100% would rather play the Steam censored version, especially after knowing what Saya truly is. Anyway, the scene then changes to the next day in college where Yo was waiting for Fuminori in class. Now, remember earlier I mentioned that Yo was supposed to be dating him? Well, since Fuminori never responded to her confession, she just had to get her answers today. She waited for him in class and even saved a seat for him, but he never showed up. Or at least, that's what she thought because when she looked around the room, she saw him sitting alone far back. At this point, Yo should have taken the hint that Fuminori might not have feelings for her anymore, but she's still keeping it positive. Maybe he just needed time. Well, all of that positivity went down the drain when Fuminori had enough of lying and told Yo the truth.
どうしようもないものを無理して壊れそうになるほど頑張って我慢してるみたいに今の咲坂さんはそう見えます。
そうかい。
一人で背負い込んだりしなくても私たちで何とかできることだってあると思うんです。たとえ何もできないにしても話してさえくれればあなたが少しでも楽になるかもしれない。私咲坂さんの力になりたいんです。他のみんなも同じ気持ちだと。
やめてくれ。そういえば君には一つ返事しなきゃいけない要件があったね。僕は君のことを とりわけ特別に意識したことなんてなかった。僕が君のことどう思ってるのか。
咲坂さん。
でもね、今ではもうはっきりと答えが出てる。筑波さん、僕はあんたのことが大嫌いだ。顔も見たくない。もう二度と会いたくないっていうのは無理だね。同じ学校に通ってるんだし。だからせめて今後は僕に声をかけないでくれないか。目障りなんだよ。
ひどい。
君さ、少しは頭を冷やした方が良かったんだよ。どうせ大宮浩二にけしかけられてその気になってただけなんだろ。自分一人でのぼせてる分には勝手だけどさ、他人を巻き込むなって言うんだ。
Even Fuminori told her that he never thought of her as someone special. He never told her that because he wasn't sure at that time. But while recovering, he had time to think about it and finally reached the conclusion that he didn't love her at all. He was only in this situation because his friend Koji was dating Yo's friend Omi, which he hated because they always try to push both Yo and Fuminori together. Yo was shocked to hear this confession. She couldn't hold it anymore and ran away from him, crying her heart out. Fuminori was satisfied with this outcome as he finally managed to say what he wanted to say. He thought that was the end of it, but unknown to him, this is where things starts to go wrong. Little did they know, Omi and Koji had witnessed the entire scene. Omi was furious because Yo was her best friend and she wouldn't be satisfied until she gave Fuminori a true scolding. Koji, on the other hand, was puzzled by his behavior. The Fuminori he knew wouldn't do these kind of things. Sure, what he did to Yo was unforgivable, but he had known him long before they entered college. He was never this cruel. Regardless of what Koji thought of him, Omi was determined to confront Fuminori. She instructed Koji to go after Yo and console her since after what happened, she must feel very hurt. Koji was reluctant to do this, wondering why the heck should he be the one consoling her instead of her best friend. But Omi reasoned with him by explaining that if she were the one to do it, she'd only make it worse. Reluctantly, Koji agreed and went after Yo, not knowing that this would be the last time he'd ever seen his girlfriend. The scene then changed to Fuminori on his way home, feeling a bit awful and miserable but nonetheless refreshed because he finally was able to say what he wanted to say since he woke up in that hospital. I mean, with the way he is now in his condition, there's no way he could maintain the relationship he had before the accident. We didn't get a backstory of what happened 3 months ago after the surgery. We learned that after waking up, Fuminori was overwhelmed by how different the world looked. Everything looked disgusting and grotesque, and soon after, his other senses were also affected. He described how the taste of food, the feel of the bedsheet, and the fragrance of flour all became unbearably foul. Eventually, the doctor's voices and every other human became unrecognizable. This was too much for him and he considered suicide every single day since he couldn't stand to live in this new world. However, that all changed when he met Saya. She was the only person he met that is not a grotesque looking monster. Both of them slowly became close until eventually Fuminori asked her to live with him since he couldn't go back to being alone. Saya hesitated, but eventually she decided to follow him home. The flashback did really well in introducing Saya. They gave you the bare minimum of information regarding who this girl is, so you're left wondering how is she normal looking when everyone else looks like a monster. However, if you pay attention, there's a lot of weird things about Saya, like why did she only visit him in the dead of night? Sure, like she explained, she lived in the hospital, but that doesn't explain why did the patient acted like they saw something horrifying. You see, Saya loves to play pranks on the patient, but the way she phrased that is as if the patient saw something horrifying. I mean, no matter how much you're terrified of something, if you see a little girl in a clean white dress, chances are people are not going to react like that. Which means something about her appearance terrifies the patients. Anyway, after the flashback ended, we see Omi arriving at Fuminori's house. She's there to give Fuminori a good scolding for what he did to Yo. While waiting for him to answer the door, she looked around and noticed the place is a mess. Grass grown wild, piles of dead leaves are scattered everywhere, and the window shutters are tightly sealed. It's like no one's been taking care of it. She feels a bit creeped out about this, but her anger towards Fuminori wins over her fear. After waiting for like 10 minutes with no answers, Omi loses her patience and decides to go into his house. She reaches for the doorknob and surprisingly finds the door unlocked. But as soon as she opens it, she's hit by a putrid smell. And then, out of nowhere, something greeted her.
何
かいるの？
A distorted voice can be heard coming from inside the house. Whatever that thing is, it doesn't sound human at all. Omi calls out, but there's no response. Instead, she heard the sound of something flopping its way deeper into the house. At this point, Omi had the chance to leave and forget all about this. But today she's feeling adventurous, so she does what every horror character would do. She goes to investigate. This turns out to be the worst mistake of her life. As she explores the house, she finds sticky slimes on the floor. This is the source of the stench. Now you would think that after seeing this, Omi would turn back and leaves. But no, she enters a pitch black room. Once she turned on the light, she was shocked to see the room painted with so many colors. This horrifies her. Now finally, she understands what she's gotten herself into, and she wants to get out as soon as possible. But luck had already left her. Omi felt something wet dripping down on her head. She slowly looks up, and what she saw makes her blood runs cold. Above her is a creature, readying itself in a pouncing position. Before she can react, the creature plunges into her mouth, tearing her from the inside and feasting on her innard. We then switch to Fuminori, who arrived home late. He heard a sound as if someone is eating, and an appetizing aroma fills the air. He instantly knows it's Saya and considers calling out to her, but he decides not to, thinking that this might be a chance for him to see her eat. When he finds her, Fuminori is surprised to see Saya eating something slimy on the floor. When she turns around, she's surprised to see Fuminori standing behind her. He wants to ask what she's eating, but remembers that Saya never ate in front of him before, so she must be quite embarrassed. Not wanting to make things awkward, Fuminori decides to join in. He asks if he can have a little bit of what she's eating. Saya is reluctant at first, but gives it to him anyway. As soon as Fuminori bites through the food, he feels succulent juice filling his mouth, combined with a strong fragrance unlike anything he'd ever tasted before. For the first time in his life, he actually enjoys eating food. He goes on to eat more, describing the food's taste in detail, which I'm not too keen on describing because at this point, we already knew what they're eating. Instead, let's talk about Saya. At this point, we can already guess what she is. Her voice is a dead giveaway when she greeted Omi. Safe to say, Saya is a creature similar to those that Fuminori encountered, with further evidence supporting this. An article about the hospital discussing how a strange event began occurring around the end of spring, coinciding with Fuminori's hospitalization. During that period, people were terrorized by something nightmarish and had to be sedated. Cats and dogs vanished and organs used for transplants disappeared. People almost lose their job because of this, but the most disturbing incident was the sudden disappearance of a human baby from the hospital. No one knew what happened, but just like how it started, all these events suddenly stopped by the end of summer, right around the time Fuminori was discharged. Sounds familiar? This was the time when Saya decided to follow Fuminori back home, and with how Omi described her, we can conclude that Saya looked just like the monster that Fuminori had been seeing. So a few days passed without any news from Omi, and this started to worry Koji and Yo. There were no signs of her returning to her apartment, and even her family was clueless about her whereabouts. They filed a missing person report, but so far there had been no development. Yo, concerned about her friend, asked Koji if he knew of any other places Omi might have gone, but Koji told her that he had already checked everywhere. This was a lie though, because Koji knew where Omi was planning to go that evening, but without any evidence yet, he didn't want to point fingers. You see, Koji suspects Fuminori had something to do with Omi's disappearance, but when he confronts him, Fuminori outright denied any involvement, and without any concrete evidence to back him up, Koji had no choice but to stay silent for now. As the bell rang, he excused himself since he had another class to attend. While walking to his class, he spotted Fuminori leaving the lecture hall. Since both of them are medical students, they were scheduled for afternoon classes, so Fuminori leaving was unexpected. Driven by curiosity, Koji decided to follow him. It was a long ride, but eventually they stopped at a place far from central Tokyo. Koji trailed him a bit more until he reached a secluded house and saw him enter. He waited for Fuminori to come out, but he never did. Glancing at the nameplate, he could see a name that is all too familiar to us. Ogai. Yes, the doctor behind his surgery, the one Saya was desperately trying to find, Dr. Ogai himself. Of course, Koji didn't know any of this, so he was confused about why Fuminori came here. As far as he knew, there was no one named Ogai in Fuminori's family. This intrigued him and he wanted to uncover what's going on. There's a playground not too far from the house and he stayed there, monitoring the house closely. Hours passed and there was still no sign of Fuminori coming out of the house. At this point, Koji was done waiting and decided to go into the house to look for him. When he enters, he found the place abandoned, filled with a stale air of mold and dust. Using his ladder, he followed Fuminori's footsteps to the second floor where he discovers a table stacked with medical books. The disarray suggests Fuminori has spent a considerable amount of time here searching for something. 3 books caught his attention, which were surprisingly non-medical related. Fun fact, these 3 books are actually real. Treaty de Chiffre was written by Blaise the Visionnaire, which eventually led to the Visionnaire cipher. Ars Magna et Ultima is a philosophical work on logic. And finally, the Voynich manuscript is an illustrated codex by an unknown author. Koji continues exploring and found himself in the bathroom. Upon opening the door, he lost his balance at the side of the bathtub filled with bones with dry flesh and blood. Looking at it closely, these bones weren't human. Remember the story about the missing animals in the hospital? Saya had been eating them, piling the remains here. While Koji examines this morbid scene, Fuminori sneaks up behind him, startling him. Fuminori explained he was here running an errand for a friend who lived here once, someone he owed his life to. When Koji asks who this person is, Fuminori promised to introduce her to him one day. Koji questioned him again, asking if this person is the reason why he's acting strange now. This made Fuminori angry and he told him it's none of his business and warned him to never follow him again. When he reached home, his next door neighbor Yosuke Suzumi spoke to him out of nowhere. He was genuinely being nice, asking Fuminori if he was okay living alone and other things as well. But since Fuminori was still upset over what Koji said, he didn't bother to listen. He did, however, manage to suppress his disgust toward him, and after excusing himself, he enters his house. We then switch to the POV of his neighbor, Yosuke Suzumi, who couldn't help but feel that Fuminori was acting rude towards him. He didn't remember him being this rude and unpleasant because, as far as he knew, he was such a nice kid growing up. He concluded that the stress of losing his family must have gone to his head, which is why he was acting this way. That night, he discussed what Fuminori was going through with his family, how it felt like he had changed after the accident. Nothing interesting happened at the neighbor's house yet, so we switched back to Fuminori's place for now. That night, Saya returned from the hospital with a box full of medical charts and surgery record belonging to Fuminori. She wanted to study them because she wanted to help him. Remember this part as it'll be an important plot point later on. Saya kept researching the paper, going through them one by one, trying to understand their content. After a while, Fuminori was feeling tired and wanted to sleep, but Saya wanted something else. Again, if you have the director's cut, this is where they show both of them being intimate in bed. She also mentioned that she wanted his babies, which might seem cute, but then you realize what she is, and then her wanting his baby sounds kind of odd. The game then shifts to the next day, and this is where things starts to go horribly wrong. It started off with his neighbor Yosuke Suzumi spending his day at home. After saying goodbye to his wife and daughter, he did the chores, ate, and finished his painting. After a few minutes, he suddenly felt thirsty and went downstairs to get a drink. As he headed downstairs, Yosuke felt a breeze coming from the living room, which didn't make sense since he was the one who did the chores and knew that he closed all of the window. He decided to check it out, and what happened next changed his life forever. As he stepped into the living room, he inspected the window and found a huge hole, big enough for a hand to enter, and opened the window from inside. Convinced that a burglar had entered his house, he picked up a solid glass ashtray nearby for protection and slowly moved through the house, opening every door to see where the burglar could hide. He made sure to open them slowly so no one could hear him. When he enters the tatami room, something yanked him and he tripped. When he looked at his leg, he found some kind of tentacle-like thing wrapping around his legs. Yosuke screams in fear, but the creature told him to not worry, and a moment after that, thin tube-like appendages penetrate his ears and nose, wriggling deeply into his skull. Luckily for him, he passed out. Before we get to know what happened to the neighbor, the game then shifts to Koji and Yo meeting Dr. Ryoko. Both decide to meet the doctor since they couldn't figure out what exactly is wrong with Fuminori. Here's the part where I find it annoying. So, everything went fine until Koji mentioned Dr. Ogai. Now at this point, we've already heard Dr. Ogai's name mentioned a lot, and when Koji brought up the name, I was certain that we would learn more about Dr. Ogai. And I was disappointed because this whole scene felt like Ryoko trying to dodge the subject and being secretive. I really don't like it when a game tries to be secretive when other characters other than the protagonist were involved. You're gonna make me expect the reveal to be something amazing, which is what I was hoping, but as you found out later on, I was disappointed. Anyway, nothing significant happened in this scene. Koji and Yo met up with Fuminori's doctor to learn what was going on with him, but instead, they were given more vague answers, so this is a complete waste of time. Switching back to the neighbor, Yosuke woke up and found himself in an unfamiliar world, the same kind of world that Fuminori was experiencing. This was a shock to Yosuke, who went insane instantly at the sight of this nightmarish world. When his wife and daughter came home, Yosuke saw them as monsters and killed both of them in cold blood by stabbing his wife until she begged him to stop, and then he proceeded to do the same thing to his daughter as well. After killing them, he got out of his house to see the world filled with grotesque flesh. This was all too much for him and he went insane. As he was laughing maniacally, Saya called out to him. When Yosuke saw her, he immediately lost reasoning and succumbed to lust. However, Saya wasn't aware of this and instantly asked him what she looked like to him, and Yosuke replied in the most creepiest way possible.
おじさんには私がどう見える？
ああ、とっても可愛いよ。
本当？じゃあ実験は成功かも。
こんな可愛らしい女の子は。
おじさん？
いい顔だよ、お嬢ちゃん。おじさんにもっと可愛らしい顔をしてみ。
As it turns out, Saya had been conducting an experiment, one that would give the other the same kind of agnosia that afflicted Fuminori, and she succeeded. But Saya overlooked one critical element, the mentality of the person she was experimenting with. At this point, Yosuke had already lost his sanity. Unable to contain his desire, he assaulted her. We then switched to Fuminori, who just came back home from searching Dr. Ogai's house once again. But this time, he finally got something. He found photos that led him to 3 different buildings in 3 different locations. He was gonna tell Saya about this until he heard her crying for help from inside the house. When he enters, he saw the monstrous figure of his neighbor doing something horrible to her. Anger filled his entire head and he grabbed the meat cleaver nearby and started slashing the monster repeatedly. The monster screamed in agony, but Fuminori kept going until it stopped moving. After coming down, Fuminori hugged Saya, who kept saying she was sorry for what she did, which was true, but Fuminori didn't understand why she would say that. Saya revealed here that she had experimented on the man's brain so that he could be the same as Fuminori because she thought Fuminori was suffering in this world, so she wanted him to get more company. But unfortunately, her plan backfired, resulting in her getting assaulted by that person. Fuminori reassured her that he had already been saved ever since he met her and spent time with her. The two then made up, and here Saya revealed to Fuminori that she had an ability to change body of living things ever since she was born. After learning through the medical files that she took from the hospital and doing the experiment, she confidently told him that she could cure him from his agnosia and asked him if he wanted that. We are then given 2 choices, whether to choose to be cured or throw it all away. Now of course, any sane person would choose the first option, but by choosing that, Fuminori technically rejected Saya, and we are now locked into a bad ending. After choosing the first option, Saya gave Fuminori a sad look. With teary eyes, she kissed him until he fell asleep, promising him that once he woke up, everything would be over. When he woke up the next day, Saya was nowhere to be seen, but everything around him looked normal once again. No pulsating flesh, no weird monsters, everything just looks normal. He called the police, and this part really confuses me because it said that the police found out that his neighbor, Yosuke Suzumi, was the one who killed his own family. But for some reason, the police charged Fuminori with all of the murder. I can understand if he was charged with killing Omi because the evidence was right inside his refrigerator, but why was he also charged with killing his neighbor's family? This doesn't make sense since the police had concluded that his neighbor was the one who committed those murder. Regardless of what happened, Fuminori was taken into custody. When he was interrogated, he told the police everything, but as expected, they didn't believe him. After a few more interrogations, he was deemed mentally ill and was moved into the White Room. One night, Saya visited him one last time and they communicated using a cell phone since at this point, she knew she couldn't show him her monster form. They talk a bit more, but when it's time for her to leave, Fuminori apologized to her for not being able to be with her and confessed his feeling for her. Saya cried when she heard that, and after saying goodbye, Fuminori was left alone inside the cell, waiting for the day Saya would return to him. Let's go back to the choice presented by Saya. This time, Fuminori chooses to not cure his agnosia, which surprises her. She asks him twice if this is the right choice, to which Fuminori responds by describing a manga he once read about a man who sees things differently and falls in love with something non-human. All this while he's chopping up his dead neighbor's body. I have to say, that's one way to confess your feeling. Once he's done dismembering not just his neighbor but his families as well, Fuminori and Saya share intimate moment on the bed. After that, they discuss the photograph he took from Dr. Ogai's house. Saya points one house that stands out, located in the middle of a thick forest about 3 hours from Tokyo. The next day, Fuminori calls Koji to drive up to that place. Koji is suspicious about this whole trip since the place that Fuminori wants to go was in the middle of a forest, and he's right to feel that way since Fuminori has a sinister plan in mind. Meanwhile, Yo, waiting for Koji, receive a mysterious message from Omi's phone instructing her to go to Fuminori's house to learn more about what's been happening with him. Yo was suspicious of this message since Omi would never text her like this, but her curiosity got the better of her and she decided to investigate. Upon arriving at Fuminori's place, she rings the intercom and receives another message telling her to go inside. The house is dark and she can smell something rotten in the air. She checks the shoe cabinet for signs of Fuminori, but what she saw made her tremble in fear. In the shoe cabinet, she saw a pair of shoes that looked just like Omi's. In that moment, she panicked and accidentally dials her most recent call, only to hear it ringing from upstairs. Her blood runs cold. Whoever or whatever it is that is using Omi's phone is waiting for her up there. As she ascends the stair, calling out for Omi in a shaky voice, she hopes that everything was a prank, organized by Omi herself. But unfortunately, that's not the case. In Fuminori's room, the smell is even stronger, but before she could react to it, something grabbed her from behind. It is not a human hand, but a tentacle-like appendages. It then proceeded to rip apart her clothes and force its way inside of her, basically tentacle-raping her. But Saya didn't do this without a purpose. Remember when she said she could change someone's body? Well, she planned on changing Yo's body. I mean literally change her, because later when Fuminori came back home, she was surprised to see Yo in human form. And after not seeing any other human female this past few months, you can pretty much guess what he did. Speaking of Fuminori, while Saya was busy reforming Yo's body, Fuminori and Koji finally arrived at their destination, an old abandoned cabin in the middle of the woods. They spent a few hours at this place finding clues about Dr. Ogai, but they found nothing. Koji decided to check outside and found nothing but a well. For some reason, Fuminori's word about this place being far from people doesn't sit well with him. As a precaution, he leaves a voice message to Ryoko detailing his whereabouts and what they're doing. He also called Yo to check on her, and this is where he heard her scream of agony, which made Koji extremely worried. But before he could turn around, suddenly Fuminori knocked the phone off his hand, followed by a punch on the jaw which made him lose balance and he fell down into the well. It was then revealed that Fuminori had planned all of this right from the start because he didn't like how Koji sticks into his business, so he decided to kill him. And what better way to dispose of someone than killing them in a remote area far from prying eyes? Since he got something to do at this cabin, this is a perfect opportunity to dispose of Koji. It's like killing two birds with one stone. As Fuminori turns to leave, Koji desperately tries to reason with him once more by telling him that something happened to Yo and they should go and help her. But at that point, Fuminori had already left. Surprisingly, Koji survived the fall but was barely hanging on. It's been 2 days since he fell down inside the well and he was reaching his breaking point. He was so tired that he started dreaming about his loved ones before snapping out of it. He knew that his body wouldn't last much longer. If the cold weather didn't get him, hunger would. But just as he was about to give up, a voice calls out his name. Turns out that person was none other than Ryoko herself. Remember the call that Koji made? Fortunately for him, Ryoko listened to the voicemail he left her and went to find him. She went down the well and handed him a bottle of vodka since that drink would warm him up. Now that Koji calmed down a bit, he suggests they go to the police to report Fuminori for what he did, but Ryoko just chuckled at that idea and dismissed it. She then looked at the well and found what she was looking for. Apparently, saving Koji was not the priority here since she clearly had other motives for coming to this place. So I think it's a good time to explain what she's up to. As you may have expected, she's not here to save Koji. She's here to find Dr. Ogai. Judging by how she said she finally realized how she was fooled by him, it's safe to say that this isn't her first time here. We then saw her pull out a son-of shotgun and showing it to Koji. She intends to kill Dr. Ogai here because of what happened in the past. Eventually, they found a door that led them into a laboratory filled with mysterious objects, grotesque statue, and other weird stuff. Ryoko warned Koji not to stare at any of the weird things in this room, especially the Latin writing on the object, but Koji, being the skeptic he is, stared at some of them, which immediately made him dizzy. Fun fact, this is actually a foreshadow of Saya's true identity. It was never shown, but it said that her appearance is similar to an eldritch abomination. Anyway, she continues her investigation of this room, and here's the part where it gets disappointing. So, throughout the game, Fuminori was searching for Dr. Ogai to get answers for everything. But he's not the only one who's doing that. Ryoko was also searching for him. So you get the sense that the game builds up this goal where your objective is to find Dr. Ogai to get answers for everything. And after all of that mysterious stuff, after all of that secrecy, we finally get to the point where we're actually close to getting the answer. Except we're not, because Dr. Ogai is dead. I really wish there was a better way to go about this, but there isn't. Dr. Ogai, the man we've been trying to find throughout the game, has apparently been dead for a while now. But what's disappointing is how they introduce him to us, the player. At the start of this game, we are led to believe that we need to find Dr. Ogai to get the answers. So we see Fuminori desperately trying to find the doctor, and we as the player also wanted to know what secret the doctor holds. But instead of finding the doctor and learning anything about Saya or Fuminori's condition from him, we get Ryoko pointing at his dead body nonchalantly as if she's pointing at an item. That is disappointing. Moving on, Koji follow where Ryoko was pointing at and find Dr. Ogai, who has already been dead for quite some time now. He immediately loses consciousness since he had never seen a dead body before. When he wakes up, he's back inside the cabin and Ryoko is sitting down on a chair reading some kind of a book. Confused by how he got there, Koji asked Ryoko, to which she explained that they got out through a hidden door that led them back to the boiler room in the cabin. There's a lot of talking here, but essentially Koji wanted to know how Fuminori is involved in all of this. The name Saya came up, which Ryoko mentioned to be part of Ogai's research. She then told him that she won't make the same mistake again, just like what she did with Ogai, meaning that she wanted to kill Saya when she got the chance. Koji then argues with her one last time by telling her that they should consult the police. But Ryoko rejects that idea again. See, Koji's reasoning was that Fuminori tried to kill him and that he must be brought to justice. But Ryoko knows more than that. She knows that whatever that thing called Saya is, it's already latched onto Fuminori and it's beyond what the police can handle. Plus, Koji didn't have evidence that Fuminori tried to kill him, so even if he tried to report him, the police wouldn't be able to do anything without anything to start with. She then told him that it's still not too late to go back and forget everything that had happened, but Koji started getting angry and told her that he couldn't just forget everything. I mean, his girlfriend is still missing, he heard Yo screaming for help, she must be in trouble. At this point, Koji knew that nothing would get through Ryoko, so he decided to take matters into his own hand. Ryoko tried stopping him by telling him that they should wait because she still needed more information about Saya. Now you would think that after Koji saw that weird stuff in Dr. Ogai's lab, it would be enough proof that this is beyond what a human can do, so he should listen to her. But no. Koji still believed that Fuminori did all of this and that Yo was still alive and needed help. Seeing as nothing she said would stop him, Ryoko gave up and handed him a revolver so that he could protect himself. She continues reading the book while Koji stepped out and back into his car. After calming down and forcing as much food as possible, Koji reached for his phone and called Fuminori. He wonders what his reaction will be when he sees the name, and he wasn't disappointed because when he picks up the call, Koji can hear Fuminori sounded surprised and a bit angry. In that call, Fuminori asks how he managed to get out, considering the well was pretty deep. This is where Koji got the idea to trick him into believing that he found something about Dr. Ogai. He didn't know why he was searching for him, but he knew it must have meant something. So Koji told him how he found a secret passage in the well that led him to a lab and he met Dr. Ogai himself. He also told Fuminori that he knows about Saya, and this made Fuminori furious because he thinks that Koji knows everything now, when really, he was just bluffing. So hearing that Fuminori sounded desperate, Koji made a deal with him. He wants Omi and Yo back safe and sound. But here's the problem, Omi is already dead. So Fuminori had no choice but to make up a lie about not knowing where Omi went. But when it comes to Yo, he told Koji that she is now his property and he wondered if she ever wants to leave. Koji didn't care about that. All he wanted now was one of his friends back safely. So he told Fuminori that he would call him again after some time and then hang up the call. Back at Fuminori's place, we can see him just finish talking to Koji while being pleasured by Yo herself. I wish this wasn't real, but it's really happening. Right now, Fuminori was feeling anxious but aroused at the same time. Yeah, you can totally see that Fuminori is not right in the head anymore. He talks to Saya about how Koji knows about her and told her that they should leave the place. Saya wasn't opposed to the idea, mainly because she just wanted to be with Fuminori. Before they left the place, Fuminori took out all of his money and used it to purchase an axe. There is no way he's going down without a fight. The next time they meet, he will kill Koji. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Ryoko had been up all night rearranging the file left by Dr. Ogai and restoring several volumes of his diary just so she could understand who Saya is and why he was researching her. Well, she did find out and she couldn't believe what she just read. In that diary, Dr. Ogai wrote about his progress in nurturing/experimenting with an unknown organism. He described how the organism was initially a creature without personality or ego, yet possessed enormous curiosity and intelligence, fast learning speed, and a huge appetite for knowledge. Day by day, he watched the creature gain more intelligence, like learning how to speak like a normal human and solve complicated math equations. When it learns about DNA, the creature was excited and grew an interest in how people reproduce and multiply. One day, the creature gained a personality and referred to itself as a female. It then asked Dr. Ogai for male sperm. While he couldn't provide it, Dr. Ogai was fascinated by this, and on his birthday, he gave the creature the name Saya, which was based on his mother's name. A few days after that, Saya gained an ability to transform living creatures into a hideous monster. This fascinates him and he wanted to see the extent of that ability, which, you guessed it, he experimented on Fuminori. We then switch to Koji, who arrived at Fuminori's place. With a gun in his hands, he enters the house to look for him, but unfortunately, Fuminori had already left the place. Still, Koji didn't let his guard down and explored the place slowly. When he enters the living room, that's where he saw the place being painted in many different colors, an indication of Fuminori's slow decline in mental health. And for a bit there, he felt sad for his friends since he didn't notice it until it was too late. But all of that pity went away when he discovers what's inside Fuminori's fridge. Inside the fridge, Koji found human guts and a hand that was all too familiar to him. A hand that belonged to his girlfriend, Omi Takahata. Now normally, people would scream in fear and even throw up at the sight. Some might even cry, but not Koji. He didn't even show any sign of sadness or shock, because all he could feel right now is anger. All he could think of was killing Fuminori. He took a deep breath, took out his phone, and here we are presented with our final two choices: call Fuminori or call Ryoko. After giving much thought, Koji decided to call Ryoko. Now that he knows that Fuminori is a crazy cannibalistic killer, he needed a trusty ally. And what better ally could he ask for than the woman who pulled out a sawed-off shotgun when they first met? As soon as Ryoko picks up the call, he immediately told her what Fuminori did. But Ryoko already knew that Fuminori was not the one killing them. It was a creature named Saya. However, she couldn't tell Koji about the creature over the phone, so she told him to meet her later when she came back to Tokyo. Koji agreed and ended the call. Meanwhile, Fuminori and his two lovely girls found another place to stay and started planning what to do when Koji arrived. Fuminori initially wanted to kill Koji himself, but Saya was worried something would happen to him. So she suggests that she should do the killing. However, Fuminori rejected that idea since he didn't want Saya to experience any more pain like before. In the end, Fuminori compromised with a plan where both he and Saya would work together to take down Koji. With all the preparation done, the two spent their time not knowing that this would be the last time they would be together. A few hours before Koji goes to see Fuminori, he met up with Ryoko to discuss their next move. Ryoko advised Koji to back out now since this is not a simple case of his friend killing somebody. But Koji was not planning on backing down. Side note, I really hate how Koji acted here. But then again, Ryoko was partly to blame since she kept being secretive and wouldn't tell him exactly what they're dealing with. But this is Koji we're talking about, the man with a narrow mind. Of course he's not going to believe anything. So the best thing that Ryoko could do was persuade him to turn back before he experienced the horrifying stuff that she went through. Still, Koji was stubborn and decided not to back out. Seeing that nothing would change his mind, Ryoko gave him the research note from Dr. Ogai and told him to read them. Koji skimmed through the notes and couldn't believe that this Dr. Ogai person was crazy. And not only that, Koji assumed that both Ryoko and Dr. Ogai's experience were nothing but fake. But still, he kept his cool until Ryoko pulls out a thermos with liquid nitrogen in it. Her plan was to kill Saya using it. This is where Koji lost his patience and snapped. He didn't care about what happened to this Saya person because all he could think about right now was killing Fuminori. Seeing as nothing could persuade him, Ryoko gave up. She told him that she wouldn't be interfering with him when he kills Fuminori, since all she wanted was to kill Saya. Koji agreed and he immediately calls Fuminori. It took them a while to reach Fuminori's place since he kept changing the meetup location. Koji thought that Fuminori was trying to mess with him to make him lower his guard, but really all of this was part of Fuminori's plan. You see, he wanted to make sure that Koji arrived at the real location late at night so that there would be no people around. That way, they wouldn't find it weird that a car would go into the dense forest for whatever reason. As soon as he arrived, Fuminori called him and told him to go inside. He made sure to park his car at an angle where the backside could not be seen. That way, Ryoko could come out without Fuminori seeing her. Koji picks up his gun and went inside the abandoned house. As soon as he enters the building, he could smell something rotting inside. This made him remember the note that Dr. Ogai describes the creature. Slowly, he went further in until he reached one of the rooms at the end of the hallway where he heard something inside. When he enters the room, Koji could see someone crying at the end of the room. He instantly calls out Yo's name and the creature responded. Yo then begged Koji to kill her since her new body was hurting her. Koji couldn't believe it until he saw Yo's appearance for a split second. This was enough to make him lose his mind, where he began shooting her repeatedly. When his gun runs out of bullets, the creature took this opportunity to wrap around him. Koji couldn't do anything except cower in fear, his hands desperately trying to grab hold of something, and finally, he found a metal pipe. Putting everything into one of his free arm, Koji swings the pipe at the creature. This allowed him to be free from it, where he repeatedly beat the creature while hearing it scream in pain. After a while, the creature stopped moving and everything went silent. Suddenly, he heard someone from behind and he immediately swung the pipe to protect himself. The person turned out to be Fuminori and the two engaged in a fight. Koji was doing well and was overpowering him until he felt something on his legs. He instantly froze in fear as he felt the same kind of sensation when the creature grabbed hold of him. He thought the creature he beat up mercilessly was still alive, but then Fuminori calls out its name and he realized that the creature was Saya. Unable to move, he was inches away from being killed until Ryoko came and shot the creature. Saya screamed in agony and was forced to release Koji. Ryoko didn't waste any time and gave Koji the thermos containing liquid nitrogen. Koji understood what needed to be done and poured it onto Saya. A loud scream could be heard as Saya's body slowly froze. In a desperate attempt to stop Ryoko, she moves her remaining tentacle and pierces her heart. But it was too late. Ryoko managed to shoot Saya point blank, destroying her once and for all. Fuminori, who saw the love of his life killed right in front of him, lost his will to live and killed himself by plunging the blade of the axe through his face repeatedly until his face split apart. In the aftermath of this incident, Koji can be seen talking to the deceased Omi, Yo, and Ryoko, and having repeated nightmares of a monstrous figure. The game then ended with Koji reassuring himself that if he couldn't bear it any longer, he'd use the remaining bullet in the gun to end himself. A pretty downer ending. I mean, Saya and Fuminori deserve a good end. Thankfully, this is not the real end. So, once again, let's return to the moment when Koji discovers the remains of Omi in Fuminori's house. When Koji discovers the remains of his girlfriend Omi, anger fills his mind. He took out his phone and dialed Fuminori's number. Surprisingly, Fuminori was expecting him to call. After a bit of back and forth arguing, Fuminori then told him to meet him at a remote location. The scene after this is similar to the bad ending, minus the scene with Ryoko. Koji follows the instruction. Fuminori led him on a wild goose chase so that he could waste his time until late at night. He arrived at the real location, discovers Yo as a monstrous figure, beat her up until she was dead, and engaged in a fight with Fuminori. This time, when Saya grabbed him, Koji didn't have anyone to save him. Without anyone interfering, Saya devoured him. But not long after that, Saya suddenly stopped. Fuminori realized that something was wrong with her and immediately rushed to her side. It was revealed here that Saya was pregnant with his child, but at the cost of her life. She requested to be taken outside to gaze the sky one last time. Saya then told Fuminori that she's giving the world to him as her final gift. With those final words, Saya grew a pair of wing and bloom. Some of you might be confused here, but what Saya is doing is basically spreading her spores to the entire world, infecting them and turning them into the same species as her. That's why she said she's giving the whole world to him, a paradise that exists only for both of them. The game then ends with Ryoko emerging from Dr. Ogai's cabin, having a pure understanding of what Saya truly is and her beauty. It then revealed that the world had already started changing, and then it cuts to Ryoko describing how she had to cut off one of her arm to prevent further infection. However, that would only slow down momentarily before she became a monster. And with that, we have reached the conclusion of this video. If I had to say anything about this game is that I don't know why my 13-year-old self thought that this game was peak and a masterpiece. It's a good game, but I wouldn't call it a masterpiece. I also want to apologize for this video's delay. It was supposed to be out last week, but I did a lot of rewrites and a lot of stuff until I'm satisfied with the project. So I'm really sorry for the delay of this video. Hopefully the next one we won't be taking this long. Anyway, don't forget to like the video, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and check out my previous video. That is all. See you.